So good afternoon, good evening, good morning to people from across the world. A very warm welcome to TM Krishna. In a bit, I'll be introducing him. So we are on day 2 of ICF India Conclave, where a whole lot of coaches, industry leaders globally have come together to talk about coaching and to talk about how we can take coaching globally in all spheres of life. And that's where we are sort of introducing these parallel lines and looking at how we can look at coaching in those spaces and what we can draw from that. So today's conversation is with, I'm so honored and privileged to have this conversation with TM Krishna. He's an eminent Carnatic vocalist from India. He's an award-winning author of many books on music, culture, society. And amongst the many awards, he's got the Raymond Magsaysay Award and Indira Gandhi Award for National Integration Standout. One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about TM Krishna is his individuality, his intensity in all his performances, and also a very strong humaneness in connecting with people and the systems around him. So I'm really, really privileged to have this conversation with you, TM Krishna. And
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So this is going to be a conversation, and just a brief on me. I'm a certified coach, and more importantly, I'm a seeker and someone who is always wanting to learn and understand more about life from all diverse perspectives. And before we get into this session, I want to share something that happened between TM Krishna and myself in call yesterday. We had a brief connecting call. And I was so much in awe of, having to have this conversation with you. And I know the immense work that you've done. For a moment, I was kind of derailed when I actually saw you in person and wanted to have this conversation. And I was just connecting back to that. And I was saying, I actually lost my presence in the moment. Right? And today we are going to be talking about coaching presence and how presence plays out in performing arts and what as coaches we can draw from that. So welcome to the session, TM Krishna. And I want to start off by asking you a couple of questions and lead the conversation from there. So let us know, share with us how as a performing artist, you feel the role of presence, of being in the moment is critical to any performance.
So sometimes I wonder whether this in the moment has been so overused by every one of us, including myself, yours truly, that sometimes I wonder whether it's one of those tenacious phrases that we are so happy using. And I sometimes think we just create and construct in the moment because our brains are so capable of doing it. So I'm always a little wary about my own in the moment, because I don't know whether it's a fake in the moment that I'm so desperate to have that I pretty much make sure the right hormones are kicked in and I get it, or whether it's really in the moment. So I start with great suspicion about being in the moment. Okay. I mean, first of all, it's kind of an odd situation for that whole frame, that whole word you used, right? Performing artist. Because the moment I say performing, it actually connotes a lot of things that is not in the moment. Mm-hmm. So it automatically denotes that there is something happening that is for the pleasure of a group of people, which is why you perform. So one important aspect of that word is this interaction between a set of people who are the performers, and another set you could call aficionados, casual listeners. They could be of a big spectrum. But in, let's just say, those interested, to just keep it simple for now.
I think we seem to.
Am I Can you hear me?
So you disappeared for a second, but we are on.
Okay, you can hear me now again?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so just tell me if I break at some point, so I'll start from where I left.
Sure.
So, when we say, so what is this in the moment, keeping in mind this complicated relationship is what I think I would like to first investigate. Because in the moment is seen as something that is pretty internal, that is happening within the individual, and the sharing of it is, or the non-sharing of it is incidental to being in the moment. It's quite possible the other person may not even recognize in the moment. Absolutely. Okay. Now, keeping that in mind, how does that play out in what is considered fundamentally a kind of an aesthetic transaction between people, between a set of people, in which one is definitely holding a higher power because they are the enablers of that pleasure, of that receiving, right? So I think as we grow up as performers, it is just about making sure people are happy. Let's be very clear. We just want people to be happy. And it's about satisfying the happiness. I'm not saying this is anything negative or positive. It's just a factual point. So I don't think we actually discuss in the moment there. And then there is that dichotomy. So when you learn art form, people will tell you about how you have to be completely immersed in it. You have to be completely absorbed. I like to use the word drowned in it entirely. Now, somewhere there is some friction between these two things. And there is a certain conflict, whether an artist recognizes it or not. Because we wax eloquent about that intensity or that being inside. But when we are on stage, we are looking outside entirely. Right? So there is, if the artist so thinks there is a tension, and I think there is a tension does develop between the two. So now something surprising happens. And the surprising aspect is that in spite of you, shall we say, catering to the needs of the audience or the needs that you have created with the audience, actually. I don't blame the audience at all for any need. I create the need and then I say it's their need. That's what we do generally. I guess that's what most companies do also, but nevertheless, keeping that aside. So the moment I am doing that, in spite of that energy or that active participation in satisfying and creating and perpetuating that need, by chance, in the moment happens. Entirely by chance. Now, how does that happen is a very interesting question to ask. I don't believe in accidents and I don't believe anything is mystical. That's where I come from. So the question that came for me is, how is it in spite of me that was in the moment? Or is it something I did that made it possible subconsciously, right? So I think what happens is, in whatever action you're involved in, whether it's music, in my case, it's music, at some point, the music just, your intensity of relationship with what you're doing at that point just grows to the point where the conscious recognition that you are intense goes away. The recognition that you are intense goes away. It's only the intensity that remains. Now, when the intensity remains, we call it in the moment. That's all. Right? So, then the next question that automatically comes is, is this all something that is blessed and coming from the heavens? And, some people have it, some people don't have it. I've heard that too, right? It's like some people have it, some people don't. You can't teach people these things. I think that's a whole lot of bunkum. Because I think it's actually got to do with attitude. And the question is, what do we do to increase the probability of that attitude? That's the only thing I can think of. Everything from the moment I got up that morning to the point where I'm tuning my tambura, what can I do in the way I am to enable that opening that allows me to receive in a manner that is open, entirely open. So I think so when I stepped back on it and I started looking at it, I came to the conclusion that there's nothing accidental about it. That it's actually got to do with what I shape within myself for it to become a possibility. I'm not still saying it will happen, but I'm saying at least you have it is in your hands to increase the probability of you actually getting there, even if it's momentary.
So that's just so beautiful, because we often, and I'm relating it to the coaching practice, as a coach, what we are always saying is that it's not something that happens only just there. It's something that is sort of, in a way, built. There is a momentum, like from the time you wake up, like you said, before you have this coaching conversation with people, there's something that you are becoming right through, and how you show up in that moment is a culmination of all of that. And so it makes me think, I recognize that this is something that just happens in a way organically. At the same time, while one is present to oneself and how one is performing, there's also a certain presence to what's happening around. In this case, the audience. So how do you sort of navigate this space between the other and yourself?
I think that depends on what you define that other is. I mean, the other itself is a problem word. I mean, the moment you define them as other, then actually there's not much going to be happening. So I think that's the interesting. So the question is, how do I define, or again, define is probably not the right word. How do I perceive the space and all that occupies the space, inanimate and animate? It could be just a wall, and the wall could do a lot. It could do nothing too. Right. So what is all that occupies that space? Is what is your relationship with all that? Is what you're trying to define. As long as you think that there is this audience that is coming there for a good evening, then it's a different relationship you're building. It's your choice to make that relationship. And I can assure you, in that relationship, there is no in the moment. It may still be pleasurable, and I'm not going to argue with the pleasure. But the question is, if you think, this is what I like to always describe an art space as. I like to describe it in its ideal, of course, as a place where all of us are just looking at something that is so incredibly beautiful and saying, wow, all of us. That's all we're doing. Now, can all of us just look at something and just say, wow? I think if you think that we are sharing in that magnificence of whatever it is, then our relationship is different.
Right.
Then I am not singing for anybody. I want to give a very interesting personal example that happened, and it was and present another conflict here, because all this sounds lovely, but when it's in reality, it gets a little more messy. So this actually happened to me. I was at a concert. I mean, there have been many concerts before this incident, but this is the first time I acted upon it. So there are many times you're singing, and there is a point of time when you just know it's over. I mean, all the music that needs to be sung for that evening has actually happened. And there is nothing more to offer or to receive. And ideally, we should all be just going back home at that moment. Which happened many times to me. I never thought I would do it. But it actually happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I was singing a concert, and it was 45 minutes. People buy tickets for your concert. Concert's supposed to be a minimum of 2 hours. You have all that. I'm giving the practical of it because it's an important aspect. I think I'd sung for about an hour, and it was all complete. And I just told the audience that I think we can all go home now, because I have nothing more to offer for you. I can sing for another 1 hour. There's no problem. But what I'm going to sing is going to be mechanical. And I just don't want to sing. And I think we can all go home. And I got up and I left. Now, little did I imagine that this would become a big circus after I left. I came back home. I remember Sangeeta is my wife, and she's a musician. She looked at me, and all she said is, looked at the time, she said, "So you did it?" So I said, "Yes." By the next morning, I realized that there was a huge hangama over this. I had disrespected the audience. I had people had bought tickets to come and listen to me. I had not respected that transactional aspect of that relationship. And of course, other bizarre stories, which are more interesting for gossip sessions. But the interesting aspect is what happened after this to me. After this, every time I wanted to get up and leave, I stopped myself because I didn't want to go through that entire process of having to explain what this is. So there is also a loss in translation that we should not forget. Because what everybody receives from moments are entirely different. And I'm just saying it's complicated. I'm not still saying it's right or wrong. It is complicated, and we can speak in ideals, but everybody is receiving with different ideals. So we just have to be a little, just think about it. I'm not saying, I wondered whether I've been untrue to myself when I've not walked out after that. That's a question I'll never have an answer to it.
So this, we won't call it the other, but being cognizant of what's happening to you within you, yet being cognizant of what's happening around you, is sometimes may seem conflicting, is what I'm hearing from you.
It is. I think it is, because see, let's even look at in the moment. How many people realize that there is an in the moment happening? If you can ask that question, that also depends on that individual, doesn't it? Now, say I am here speaking to you, and somehow I am completely in it. You are not. You're still receiving. Now, automatically, we are speaking two different languages.
Right.
Now, the question is, am I going to seek to reconcile it? I don't think so. But am I going to understand that there are two parallel streams in play? Yes. That's all I'm saying. I'm not still giving a solution to the problem, but I'm just saying that we need to be cognizant of this. And the reverse too can happen. I tell you, that has also happened. How do you explain it? So it's as much in the receiver. Let's remember that too. So I could be, let's say, one of those days where I'm just singing. But the receiver is in such a position, herself or himself or theyself, in a way to enter what is being received, what is being given or offered, in a manner that even the giver is not. That's also a distinct possibility.
Yes.
So, we have to, both can happen, and that too has happened. I know those days when actually I don't think anything happened. But I've met people who look at me, and when they look at me, I know it was something else for them. Now, how do I explain that? It's actually them. So a very important aspect is it's ultimately every individual. It's that individual. It's not, the artist is, it's just, I think it sometimes is incidental. It's just a catalyst of one pathway. That's all.
Right.
It's the magical thing that the species, the Homo sapien species, figured that there could be pathways like this. That's magical.
And I can so relate to this, because in coaching conversations, there is the coach and there is the coachee or the client. And when there is no connection there, and you can't really force that connection. There's something that happens, like you said, it's magical. And after that connection has happened, the way they have received it may not be the way that you intended it to be, but they've received something. And if you ask the coach, and I've had this experience, if you ask me to recreate that, what did I do? What happened there? I wouldn't be able to do that. And I think that's the beauty of what you're saying is it's something that happens in the moment, but one needs to be cognizant of this parallel thing that could be happening, and can we sort of navigate that space?
I think there has to be some temporality to these conversations. That's my fear always, because it's very easy to, I'm not saying you are, don't get me wrong, Priya. I'm just saying that, it's very easy to detach it from terra firma in that way. And I think it needs to be grounded entirely in reality. And because this is real, this is absolutely real. And therefore these different resonances coexisting is a very important aspect of in the moment itself. So, I mean, let me put it even this way. When you ask, say, very complicated, I mean, in what I do, I'll tell you what, I'll give another personal example. A lot of people find it very difficult to align the TM Krishna, who they see as a writer and speaker, with TM Krishna, the singer. And I'll tell you why they don't align. They find disalignment. They say, like, this guy has split personality. There's some problem with this fellow. And I'll tell you why they look at it that way. It's very interesting for me to observe it, because they see in the music, to them it is divine, maybe something that moves them. They cry without knowing why they cry, etc., etc., etc. And they have already defined why that is happening. The reasons for that to happen has been defined in each individual's head, or that connection that they find. And then they move the frame to another frame. And that frame is the political TM Krishna. There he's talking about all these unnecessary ideas like caste and gender and politics. He's commenting on political parties. Now, this is like very dirty stuff, right? Now, this is conflicting in their mind space. And I can understand why it's conflicting. I completely comprehend it. But I never say this. Nobody is ever, the problem is nobody comes and asks me this directly. If they did, I will tell them, can you for a moment pause and forget about the reasons you have framed for why you feel so deeply when I sing, and wonder whether one of the reasons why you feel deeply is because I speak about caste. Is that even a possibility? Is it because I ask those very difficult questions about myself, about the ugliness in me, about my limitations as a human being? Maybe that's one of the reasons why when I sing, at times, something happens and something opens. And to me, that's the connection.
That's just so authentic and so real. I'm going to just take us to another polarity, if you want to call it, these conflicting ideas in our head. So there's this grammar and the language of tradition. It offers a certain framework and structure for what you sing and how you sing. Yet, TM Krishna is always someone who is very spontaneous, flexible, innovative. From that spaciousness, something emerges. So how do you sort of straddle this journey between the structure of maybe a concert or, the tradition versus the flow and the innovation, and just stay true?
Well, I do hope I'm true, but let's just say we believe it for now. But so, every one of these words we use, right? Tradition, sampradaya, or, it's actually habit.
Yeah.
It's actually a simpler word. Yeah. It's habit. Yeah. It's either a likable habit or a dislikable habit. It's comfortable or uncomfortable. It's still a habit. That's all. So these grandstanding words actually mean nothing. It means the same thing or similar things, or things that are connected in a certain way have been done again and again and again with several extensions at some point of time. Now, for me, the question is very, very simple, actually. So the question is, if I am comfortable with it, I just ask myself, why am I comfortable with it? It's actually a very simple question for me. So, because I think if I'm very comfortable with something, then I'm not able to see it. So, because I'm so comfortable, why would I want to really see it? I don't want to see it. I love this chair. What do I care how the chair is constructed? I just love it. If I'm uncomfortable with the chair, and then I'm looking below and saying, can I just adjust this? Why is this not turning? So it's very interesting. We ask questions of things only that we are uncomfortable about. I prefer to ask questions about things I'm comfortable about. Okay. So the moment you frame it that way, then all these things don't matter. I mean, tradition is just another word for me. So if you ask me in my own field, I had to think for myself and say, okay, what is this music? Because it comes with a lot of told things, right, which you absorb. And all of those things are quite wonderful things, by the way, if you look at it from one perspective. It is. I mean, I enjoyed every one of those things. But are those told things really allowing you to access what you're doing or what you aim to share? Or are they not? Is a question that each individual has to ask themselves. I am not going to ask this for anybody else. To me, the moment I asked that question about my comfort, I found many of these things just crumbling and falling. Now, the interesting aspect was, there was one thing I was never sure of in the beginning. I said, okay, if I start just peeling these things off, maybe there'll be nothing left to peel. Now, that fear is a real fear, right? Suppose there's no music left. If I just peel everything off and there's no Carnatic music left, what do I do? I'm out of a job. But you know, that's a very serious possibility, right? I may find everything so problematic that I may say there is no music left. And you realize it actually doesn't work that way with anything. The more you peel, the more you realize that what you peeled was unnecessary. That's all you realize. And at some point of time, you come to an understanding that there is an aesthetic body, or there is a conceptual body, depending on which field you are in, which you have not actually accessed all this while. And even when you access it, you push it away because you were so comfortable with everything that you peeled. So this question of format, this question of structure, all these are scaffoldings that make us feel very good about ourselves. Right. Whether you're the audience or the performer, it's the same. Now, if you just break all that down, is there a building left or not? Are you willing to reside in a building that's unpainted, that it has jagged edges, that does not have flooring on some floors, that the plumbing is bad? Are you willing to sit there and build it all again? And maybe somebody else will look at it and say, that's a problem too. Are you willing to even hear that? That's the interesting journey for me.
So we often talk about leaning into discomfort, and saying that something emerges when we are able to move into that space. But my question really is, aren't these scaffoldings necessary to even build this building, even if it is not complete, even if it's got jagged ends, even if it is ugly? But this scaffolding does serve a purpose. What do you think?
Well, the scaffolding is not a question of purpose. It's always going to be there, whether you like it or not, because we are people of society in society. Simple as that. You don't have a choice in scaffolding. Your scaffolding is predetermined in your life.
Okay.
It's already determined. You are not deciding what your scaffolding is. Where you were born, who you were born to, your gender, your education, your street, where you travel, where you will not travel, everything is your scaffolding. Our job is to recognize that we live in a scaffolding. And the moment we recognize that we are part of this scaffolding, then dismantle it. And then see if you can still find yourself. That's all. Because, and are there going to be new scaffoldings? Of course there are going to be new scaffoldings. We have species of habits, species of identity, species of clusters. We love to hold, control, collect ourselves. We're going to do it always. We're never going to let that go. That's for sure. But are we willing to recognize, be absolutely naked and say, are you willing to actually say, you are just the scaffolding? Let's start from saying something that's very problematic, even if I say that you're just a scaffolding. Is there anything of you beyond the scaffolding? Can we ask ourselves that question? Then maybe you'll find something. Maybe you will not. I don't know. But I think more, this whole inner and outer, and this whole question of what is outside and what is inside, it's complete osmosis. It's like, it's one of those things that keep flowing on both directions. So you really cannot put your finger on it. But I mean, everything that you hold on to, even the most profound thing, is a scaffolding. Even your spiritual guru is a scaffolding. Everything is a scaffolding, right? So the question is interesting. So what I would say is, I'll flip it this way and say, can I feel all those things without that structure? Can I be in the moment without every one of these structures? Is that level of honesty even a reality, or is that something, again, I'm just creating for myself? Maybe I am, but it's worth a try.
And what happens when you try that?
What happens is that, I mean, I'm just telling you what I think happens. It may be completely, wrong to it. What happens when you give it a try is that you're able to then exist acutely aware, not some great sage or some guy who's got this complete jnana of this whole world. No. You're just able to exist in a place that allows you to be constantly aware. And many people say, isn't that such a troublesome space to be, already aware? So it's not. It's actually quite very interesting. Very, very interesting space. It doesn't mean you won't do things wrong. It doesn't mean that you won't make a mess of things. It doesn't mean you don't have blind spots. You have every one of them. But I think what that allows you to do is to be one thing, which is the only thing we can try being, is honest to ourselves. Right. That's the only thing we can hope to be. Everything else can I don't care. I think consistency is nonsense. There's nothing, anybody who's consistent, I think, is a fraud. Because as a species, we're inconsistent, and that's why we are beautiful.
Right.
That's why you have art. Yeah. Because we're inconsistent. Right? So I think what it allows you to enter is to be acutely aware. And in that acute awareness, you're looking at scaffoldings being built. You're looking at yourself building another scaffolding. You're able to say, oh, shucks, I just built 2 floors of it. Let me just bring that down. Right. That's so fascinating to see yourself and see your movement in action through your life. And that's quite beautiful.
So in a way, you're also interacting with yourself, looking at yourself. And we often say this I'm just trying to sort of correlate it to what a coach does and what we do in a coaching conversation. Very often we invite the clients to look at their scaffolding. And the scaffolding could be in terms of some strong held beliefs, some framework, the lens that they're wearing, that's keeping them where they are. And it's really a journey of awareness to say, okay, how is this scaffolding now serving me? Should there be another scaffolding here? And it's replaced by something that will serve me for now. So it's all about building that awareness. And as a coach, I think it's important for us to be present to the fact that, hey, there's a dismantling happening here and there is a scaffolding that's coming up. And just being that witness and sharing that with the clients, or the coachee. So I think this word scaffolding will stay with me for some time. I think it just is very, very aptly described. So, I had attended one of your concerts, and this was in Chennai Mathematical Institute a couple of years ago. And what I got in touch with when I was present there is, between songs, you'd kind of just had gone within yourself and you looked at the book and you searched for some song and suddenly you just sang. And that moment between one song to the other that you were singing, what I experienced, like you said, it depends on the receiver. What I experienced is it's as if there was a performance still going on, right? There was a certain vibrancy and energy even in that space where there were no notes, audible notes, so to say. And for me, that is presence. I mean, there's a presence in the silence between notes, between the audience and the performer, between the songs that you sing. So how do you sort of, I thought that was very spontaneous and very, something wonderful, actually. I experienced that in that moment? I don't know if you planned it or what, but what do you have to say about a real, a concert that you go for and something like this?
Well, because my views on concerts have kind of radically shifted from when I first started singing concerts. So I'm going to speak from today and not from the past, because that journey is a complicated journey to explain. See, let's just say that we're discussing a day when music is actually happening, okay? And I'm only talking about that day, or not on the day when music is not happening. That's the day, I mean, there's nothing to really talk about. What actually happens is no song actually ends and no song actually begins. To me, the whole evening is just one flow that's happening. And I come more or less with a blank slate. I do not decide what I'm going to sing, and that's not a quality of genius. Please don't immediately think of me being some special human being. It's just, I think, my personality to a large extent. I just like things to be, let's just see what happens. Let's see what happens. That's all. I just like to just receive and just take it as it happens. And so what actually happens is that the song sometimes never ends. It's just a song that's moving another, and sometimes I don't know what to move into. I'm still, I'm still lingering on. So I'm flipping the book to probably say something striking me as I flip the book. Yeah. Or maybe it's nothing is striking me, and maybe something did strike me. So one thing that has happened is that a lot of the formality for me is out of the window regarding performance. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it's just something. Many things have changed from the way my whole demeanor has changed. I do not look at people anymore. I very rarely look at people. I'm half the time looking down. It's not something I designed one fine day. It just started happening. That I don't look at people. I'm looking on the floor. And even if I'm looking at you, I'm actually not looking at you. You're just an element among the many elements which are in front of me. So that's just that's the way I just, because it's only the sound that really matters. I don't even call it music, it's sound. And sound is, if you can get yourself into it, then it's something that's completely enveloping. And you said something about silence. It's it's very interesting. We always talk about the silence in the music. And in general, when we say that, and correctly, I'm not saying it's wrong, we speak about the silence between the notes, right? What about the silence in the note? Why don't we ever discuss that? There has to be silence in the note. When I speak to you, there must be silence. Otherwise, you're not listening. There's no point to this live silence when there is no action or act, if I want to use that. So we rarely speak about the silence in the music. And so it's got nothing to do with speed. It's got nothing to do with verve or energy, it's just got to do with the quality of the sound that you're hearing. Right. And the quality of the sound determines if there is silence in it or not.
Wow, that was quite something. Yeah, we do often talk about the silence between notes and not. And recently, I got in touch with somebody who was speaking about, this person is both exuberant and there's a certain stillness. I don't know why, but this conversation seems to keep bringing up these polarities and things apparently at diverse ends, right?
And same thing can happen when you speak. I've had it when I speak sometimes. Right. Or when I write. I mean, the same thing happens. There's silence in the words as they're being typed. Or there's when you're speaking and suddenly it's no different from me singing one evening, and you just feel at the bottom of the stomach, and
So, just a curious question here. So you have reached a stage where in your journey, there's been a lot of when you're at a stage where there is some amount of experience that's already gone into who you are now today, and you will change the next moment, the next concept, next. But when you started, and I'm asking this question for the benefit of aspiring coaches, and I'm seeing how that can be related. What was that journey about, this, this total focus that you bring? To me, it seems like something that needs to be built, at least in the initial days, before you learn the grammar and before you kind of got this experience to back you. What was that like?
So I don't, in fact, think any of this has got to do with the music at all. This is what I think, because it's got to do with everything else about you, not the music. So, if you ask me, let's talk about my career as I grew up. I mean, I started singing concerts when I was 12 years old, knew nothing about the music, but got on stage, crooned for a while, came up the ladder. I was like any other young person who wants to make it big in their field. I mean, there's pretty much the same thing. And that's the energy of being young and, ambitious. And but I think what I believe helped me in my journey, if I look at if I just turn the clock back, I don't know whether I can have a conversation with the PM Krishna of 1996. I don't know. I don't know whether you'll have a meeting ground, very honestly speaking. If it's, I don't think we would have a meeting ground. We'd probably argue ad nauseum on most things, but I think what really helped me was not the music, was everything else that I had in my life in terms of my environment, my schooling, my home, the conversations that we had, the questions that we were encouraged to ask. So in a way, it is all that coupled with my ability in music that comes together. It's very well possible that you may never recognize the pathway that music offers you if you have everything else closed in your life. I mean, I said something. Art by itself does nothing. Artists do it. It's the individual, and it's a collective, depending on the field. By itself, it can do nothing. Art is not going to make the whole world kiss and hug. Nonsense. It's just something we feel good about. But artists can make people hug and kiss, and also can stop wars. It's the people. It's about the individual. It's about the individual and the collective. It is about our consciousness. It's about the inwardness and the outward collective we are able to bring together. It's about the quality of our relationships. It's about learning to listen to people. And that's about being a human being. And if you're a human being, then your art will be humane. If not, it will not be.
Everything that you're saying is what, as a coach, one hopes to...
I've decided I'm going to become a coach after the session.
You would make a great coach. Because a fundamental thing is this need to inquire, right? And the ability to listen, intentionally listen to what is happening, and to be present to what is emerging from that space. And I think that is really powerful.
I'm just telling you that not that I'm very good at any of this. I just telling you this is what I know. But I know, for example, one of the things I'm not very good at is at times I have this habit of thinking faster in my head on what you're saying. That's something I do very often, and I know. So I'm already completing. I'm already responding to what you're saying. We all do this, but I do it at double speed sometimes, and that's not very helpful to listening. Okay. But I just have to keep that in mind.
Sure. So I'm just going to open up and see if there are any questions that the audience has at this point. So Shubha asks, how have you evolved?
How have I evolved? So one of those questions that any answer given to that question, I would myself probably be arguing about. First, the word evolution presumes a positive trend in it, and presumes already judges the previous position. So when you say something is evolved, you're judging I'm not about me, I'm just saying in general, when you say something is evolved, you're judging the previous position.
Absolutely.
It's not, so, I mean, is that the word we should use? I mean,
Right.
I'm sorry I ask a question on a question, and it's just something that my brain works that way. So apologize to all of you that, the word that you use, it triggers a question in my head. So I don't know whether it's evolution or not. Have I become more aware than before? I would say yes. That I would say yes. If that's evolution, fine. Maybe it is. I don't know. So how did that happen? I mean, I don't think it was any moment or any catharsis in that sense. I think it is just part of the journey that I went through. And I think a lot of that journey was trying to dismantle the identities that I clinged on to, I think, to a large extent. I think that was a very important part of my journey. And it is not just about an anthropological or a sociological, political thing. It's actually also about how you hear, how you see. I mean, when I'm looking at Priya, I am looking at Priya through at least 5 different sheets of film. Absolutely. Right? So, am I looking at Priya or am I looking at myself as something I don't know? Right? So, suppose I just keep taking those film layers out, one by one by one. Right? So, then what do I see? Do I really see Priya? That's all that I've been trying to do, and I continue trying to do. And what it does is it changes everything I see. It changes the triggers that it has in me, positive, negative, ambivalent, etc. It changes the idea of pleasure. It changes the idea of beauty. It changes the idea of how I hear something. The word sounds different. The emotion sounds different. So therefore, that's all that you can keep trying to do, and that's all I keep trying to do. That's all. So whether that's just trying to be aware. Whether it's evolution or not is a different thing altogether.
So we often say, you're always becoming. You don't arrive. That is, there's always this, journey that you go on, and moment to moment, who I was before our conversation is not who I am after this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful space. I'm just looking at this one more question I think we have time for. Neha asks, what are your views on being in the flow?
So being in the flow has been described in different spaces in different ways. You hear that being said in sports, you hear it in saying in different things. Now, is in the flow in the moment? I mean, this is an interesting thing to think about, right? That's where we are somewhere going to, I think, in that question. It's possible. It's possible. I don't know. I'll tell you why I don't know. Because in the flow can also happen in that a very acute state of excellence.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's a very acute state of excellence. It's incredible. I really think it's amazing. But is that in the moment is a very different question. Now, suppose I play a piece of music after a concert, which I have sung, where I believe, or shall we say all of us collectively believe, something spectacular happened. Let's say. It's highly probable that piece of music was not perfect musically. Okay? It's possible I sang few notes off key. Right. I can tell you I know it is. Let me even put it that way. I know it is. So, in the moment is not a position of in excellence, which I think what in the flow more is. Okay? In the moment is a kind of a sharing which is very different from being in the flow. In the moment, there is an aspect of a collective wonderment of some sort. And that wonderment need not be technically perfect. but it can be emotionally and psychologically extremely profound.
Absolutely.
So I'm not yet convinced that in the flow and in the moment are synonymous to each other. I think there are days when I've been in the flow where I could do nothing wrong. I was in overdrive, but was I in the moment? No.
That's a beautiful distinction. And I liked your explanation of what is flow, which is a heightened state of excellence.
Yeah.
And it's not something, very often we look at flow as it comes, we'll do it as it comes. But even there, it's not as it comes. There is a, there is a certain rigor in that.
Oh yeah, in the flow, it's one of those. It's that very high level of excellence. I mean, where everything is like perfectly, like it's like, when you're assembling a Lego set and everything fits so well. It's like that, and that just stays for say 10 minutes or 15 minutes or for half an hour. It's like watching a tennis player. When Federer can do no wrong. But that's an incredible level of excellence, and that's a lot of rigor and a lot of effort. But is that in the flow? Is that in the moment? That's I think that's slightly different. I think there's a nuance there that maybe we should think about.
So there is a possibility that they could be incongruence, but
that's also possible. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but you know what? Now that you said that, I'm not very sure they can coexist. I'll tell you why. Because I don't think in the moment is a perfect space. I think the experience of in the moment is not perfect. Perfect in a very tactile sense. What I mean, right? I don't think it is. And I think that's why it makes it, that's what's special about it. It's so real, but it's such awareness of that reality that is being shared that is intense. When you hear that sound, and we all are so aware of that reality emanating from that sound, that you just know it.
It's not a cerebral connection. It's some other sort of a connection, and I don't know.
It's a visceral connection, I guess.
Yeah. So wonderful. I'm just checking any more. So someone wants to know, what books do you read?
Oh God. Okay, I was a very bad reader in my younger years, so I never read much. But I'm more a non-fiction reader than a fiction reader. I'm very bad at fiction reading. So I mean, all kinds of books, from history to philosophy to sociology to everything. I mean, non-fiction is a broad spectrum of things I would read. I'm one of those obsessive people that if I have a question and I can't sleep that night, and then I have to kind of, it's like, little cuckoo that way. So I need to work that out in my head through the night. Then I'll pick up a book the next morning. I'll disagree with something, obviously, and then I'll get even more worried by why I disagreed, and then I'll go on. So, I mean, so I do surround myself with books, and there are many around me right now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
What I'm taking away here is also the concept that who you are as a musician or who you are as a person is not informed by just that. Say, for example, you're a musician. Who you are as a musician is not informed by just that music. It's also informed by, the collective, the external, the systems around you, and your interaction with that. I think that's a very powerful thought, and that I'd like to also leave the audience with. Who you are in the moment, or who you are right now, is not just only that. Yeah, and that's what I feel, that just these rigorous learning processes, in some ways, yes, it will take you to a state of flow because you can get perfect at it and you can be excellent. But it's in those small moments of when it's not very resonating, magic can happen.
Yeah. I think perfection is overrated.
Right. Right. So one last question from someone, that you start tuning in your, musicians, you start tuning in your tambura even before. And I've heard you say this before, that the performance or the concert or whatever it is starts even before you actually sing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a very important aspect of the process. So there is process here, there is a process of, it's like, it's a very funny thing, right? We always use this expression in Tamil, and I'll say it in Tamil first for those who may know Tamil. Like, ella nalla okkarano. We say this, okay? This literally means everything should be seated comfortably. Yeah. That's what it actually means. Yeah. But that's exactly that feeling that, you sit in a chair sometimes and you just know you're completely inside and you're completely comfortable. And there is that, you breathe beautifully. Most important aspect we didn't talk about is breathing. And the most important thing about singing is breathing. It's not the voice, it's the breath. And when you breathe is when you can sing. And when you sit in a chair, the most comfortable chair is a chair in which you say, Why do we say that? That's because we have just, like I said, nalla ukandachu in Tamil. Literally. So that needs to happen in a concert. And it starts when we start tuning the tambura in the green room or maybe on stage. And that is the sound that is bringing all of us together in resonance. And that's our connectivity, right? So it's completely there. And, something I started doing after a friend actually told me. He said, why do you musicians have this screen in front of you and you all get ready and it's like you're presenting a theater or drama. Why do you need to do this? And it's a very valid point. And he said to me, actually, the audience should be part of everything from the time that you're tuning the concert. So they too are getting tuned. So I started doing that. We just walk on stage and I said, everybody stays quiet for 10 minutes. It's very hard to get people quiet for 10 minutes when they think music is not happening. But actually, music has already started happening.
Absolutely.
So when you tune it, it's from being off key and then slowly everybody is getting attuned. There is already something that is being shared and there's already a space being created for hopefully a profound sharing.
So that was indeed a profound sharing, TM Krishna. What an absolute pleasure to have had this conversation with you. I really feel honored and privileged to do
No, not at all. No, not at all. Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you.
And thanks to the team from ICF India Conclave for setting this up and making it easy for us. And to all the audience who've been part of this conversation, and I'm sure you're taking away lots of tidbits of learning that you can try and apply. So on that note, I want to close this and thank you so much once again for having graced this.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, ICF. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.